Hello. Beep, 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 beep. Morning. Welcome to the Court of the Edijester. How the devil are we, folks? Don't forget, subscribe, click the button, do the business, the usual, or join my Substack. You can now become a paid subscriber on Twitter. We're going to see if we can build a little community on there, do various things, or come and be a warrior teacher starting in October for our new intake. We've got a very important article for you today, which comes from the Stark Naked Brief, news.starknakedbrief.co.uk Substack, which I'll put the links as usual in the doobers downstairs. This is really important to me because it's an article about Manchester Council, and as my regular viewers will know, I have form with Manchester Council, Manchester Pride, and all those involved in that ridiculous safeguarding fail that was the Vigil 2024, the Gay Men's Vigil, what was originally a Gay Men's Vigil for those who died of AIDS. This is quite an extraordinary piece of work here from Stark Naked Brief called JJ Starkey, and was published on the 11th of July. So let's take a look and see what's going on with Councillor Bev Craig, who you can see there on the screen. Bev Craig became leader of Manchester City Council in December 2021, making history as the city's first female and LGBT council leader. Before that, she served as executive member for Adult Services, Health and Wellbeing and Inclusion, was deputy chair of Manchester Health and Care Commissioning and co-chair of the Manchester Local Organisation, which leads me to ask how much of this healthcare problem that we're having, how much of this nonsense of trans in healthcare and nonsense of gender identity and non-binary originated in Manchester. It seems to me that everything's coalescing around that point, but we'll find out as time goes on, I'm sure, whether or not this is the case. Her involvement there in health and care commissioning should require some investigation. Upon taking office, Craig gave a bold interview to The Guardian, vowing to put the safety of women and girls at the centre of her administration. She criticised urban planning as too male-led, arguing it created public spaces that do not feel safe for others. 2 years later, in a separate interview with I Love Manchester, she reaffirmed that women's rights, anti-racism and LGBT rights movements were central to her political work. Here we go, see? Every time these lunatics. But last week, these priorities faced renewed scrutiny. A damning report, there's a link there to the report, by His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services, that's the HMIC FRS, revealed that Manchester City Council had failed to share critical data with police investigating grooming gangs. The obstruction caused significant delays, in some cases even undermining evidence preparation for court. This is interesting. The abject failure of the Manchester Safeguarding Board, in the letter that you will have previously seen that I've explained to you about, where it said our priority is EDI, their priority isn't child safeguarding, which is very worrying in its own right, is really echoes with this. It rhymes with this, in that also I had no response from any councillor who I wrote to, or for that matter, from either Bev Craig or my councillor, John Connor Lyons. They responded with silence to my concerns about safeguarding and the dangers of trans to children and young people. Silence. It was only the Manchester Safeguarding Board that got back to me to tell me they wouldn't be engaging with me again. Sound familiar? Certainly does to me. Information requested by Greater Manchester Police took many months to arrive. When it did, the files were so heavily redacted that some pages contained only a few words. Why? In the inspector's words, the material was so censored, it became impossible to assess the evidential value. In effect, they were useless. The council cited data protection laws, claiming that third-party privacy rules had prevented them from sharing the information. But other councils across Greater Manchester said the same data promptly and without redactions. So the leader of the council, who claimed the safety of women and girls was central to her administration, ultimately failed to cooperate meaningfully with the very investigations into the most serious forms of abuse, short of murder, inflicted on women and girls. The HMIC report singled out two major operations that had been particularly affected: Green Jacket and Bernese. The former secured its first conviction earlier this year and remains alive of investigation into historic abuse under Craig's leadership. The report was part of a wider inspection into how grooming gangs and child sexual abuse cases were handled across Greater Manchester, involving all 10 local authorities, health agencies and police. It noted that GMP has 59 investigations into multi-victim, multi-offender child sexual exploitation involving 714 known survivors and 1,099 suspects. It is unclear to what extent Craig and the council's stonewalling influenced these others' investigation. That such data failures occurred in Manchester carries particular weight. This is the same area in which officers refused to pursue investigations involving Asian men due to concerns about inflaming community tensions, dismissed whistleblowers' evidence, and blamed survivors for their own abuse. Multiple inquiries and reviews have confirmed what many suspected. Manchester authorities were among the worst offenders in the national grooming scandal, failing to act and covering up the abuse. You'd expect any council leader, especially one who championed women's safety, to make confronting that legacy a top priority. It is obvious that she did not. It doesn't take Superman to work it out. I'm not surprised, because if I raised a safeguarding concern, that to me would be the kind of thing that would make you go, right, we need to have a look, which is a minuscule problem in comparison to violence against women and girls, and in particular in comparison to the lives and to the importance of justice to survivors of the Pakistani rape gangs. It is absolutely imperative that the council should be all over this. I mean, the safeguarding team should have been all over it years ago. If they won't listen to my little complaint, there's no way on God's earth they're going to do anything about this. That's how I see it as. I see it as a culpability that needs to be taken to task. I think it's a legal problem. I think there needs to be arrests, and the sooner they happen, the better. We're talking about girls being treated in the most appalling ways. As Stark Naked Brief says, short of murder. And if they aren't down to dealing with that, if they're not up with keeping up with what's happening with that, and if they're not talking about it, as Stark Naked Brief shows us here as you go through the article, which you'll see when you have a look, that Bev Craig's never mentioned grooming gangs. Never. Never once. It's an utterly extraordinary thing to find out that those that should be in charge, those that should be protecting children, are so remiss in their duty, and I include the Manchester Safeguarding Board in this particular opinion, that they fail on such a grand scale. And then not just they fail, they appear to, because this is what it appears to be, covered up. That's what it appears to me to be, a cover-up. Maybe not to you, but certainly just to me. You'll let me know, as you always do in the comments. But if they're not going to react to something as big as this, they're certainly not going to react to me saying, hang on a minute, we need to take a look at Manchester Pride and what they're up to. They're not going to. Which is why they were able to write me a letter from the Safeguarding Board saying, our priority is equality, diversity and inclusion. It's a bloody corrosive. We've got to get it gone. EDI, get in the bin. That's what I say. Okay, that'll do for today. All right, you have a fantastic day. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.